Deadline has released a new article claiming that their industry sources say $44 million plus is what Rise of Skywalker is going to make for its advanced screenings on Thursday. Now, $44 million is an interesting amount because $45 million is what The Last Jedi got. So what they're saying here is it might get more than Last Jedi, but they're not quite claiming it yet by saying 44 plus. But $44 million is a massive amount of money. If that's what it gets, that will be the fourth biggest ever. Okay, Avengers Endgame got 60 million, Star Wars The Force Awakens got 57, and with inflation, I believe Star Wars The Force Awakens beats what Endgame got for its Thursday previews. And then, as I just said, The Last Jedi got $45 million. So we may very well be looking at the third biggest advanced screening money in the US domestic market history. Now, this is the opposite of the news coming out of China. I did make a video earlier today about that. In China, currently it has earned a $5.4 million with a total of $1.79 million so far on Friday. To compare that to The Last Jedi, it earned over $8 million on its first Friday. So Friday hasn't quite finished yet in China. The $1.79 million will go up, but compared to the $8 million that the previous film got on its Friday, that is a massive gap. So things are pretty catastrophic for the box office in China. Complete opposite in the US domestic market. Looks like it's pretty much on par with what The Last Jedi did. The same time that this news has just been released, and this is from quote-unquote sources, this isn't official, this $44 million plus, but at the same time that that's come out, the industry tracking figures have been reduced down from $175 million opening weekend to $170 million opening weekend. So the tracking statistics they use, they basically try to use a formula to look at social media likes and views and all this sort of stuff, and look at how much people are talking about it, in addition to other sort of sources on pre-tickets and so on. So they've got formulas they try to use to project these things, and using those, they've actually downgraded it. So very interesting that the actual ticket sales look like they're up, perhaps, but they've downgraded how much money they'll get over the weekend. So things are still all over the place. If we look at the actual records for the opening weekends in the US domestic market, we got Avengers Endgame way at the top. It's really not going to get near that. We got Infinity War at $257 million. That's probably outside the realm of possibility, but it's not that far off. And we have number 4 there, Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi, $220 million. Entirely feasible, that's what we're looking at. If the advanced screenings are identical, then it's possible that the Friday will be the same, the Saturday will be the same, and the Sunday will be the same. And we're looking at around about $220 million for the opening weekend. If you look down towards the bottom of the list there, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, $169 million. That's where the low estimate is right now for the tracking. So that would make it the 14th biggest opening in North American history if it comes in at the low end at $170 million. A couple of weeks ago, I put out a video predicting a $190 million opening weekend for The Last Jedi, and I based that on the difference between Episode 8 and Episode 7's opening weekends and the number of YouTube views for the main trailer for The Last Jedi versus The Rise of Skywalker. And here you can see the actual total YouTube views over the last 2 months. They were both released pretty much 2 months before the films came out. And what you can actually see is The Rise of Skywalker gain on The Last Jedi. So interest in The Rise of Skywalker is worse, but it was a lot more worse and then has gotten a lot better. And you can actually see the big uptick in the last 2 days. So for whatever reason, over the last 2 days, there's been a larger number of people watching the trailer for Rise of Skywalker on YouTube compared to what the last 2 days of people watched for The Last Jedi before it was actually released 2 years ago. What we can also do is just chart the percent difference between the two movies' views. So instead of having 2 lines there, this one line just summarizes what is the gap between The Last Jedi's views on YouTube and The Rise of Skywalker's trailer views on YouTube at the same point in time. 2 charts here show the same thing. The bottom one is just zoomed in more than the top one, and the red arrow indicates where The Mandalorian was released, and also the computer game Jedi Fallen Order was released about the same time, and both of those have had fairly positive reviews. And what you can see is that interest in watching the trailer compared to the previous film's trailer was sort of flattening out around about the 76-77% mark. And then when The Mandalorian was released, things have actually increased at a fairly dramatic rate. And then over the last 2 days, you can see how much it actually ticked up. And so the difference between the interest in both trailers right now is about 90%, where it was around about 76-77% earlier, again before The Mandalorian was out. So just using this as a completely rough guide, if it has 90% of the interest, well, maybe it'll get 90% of the actual weekend opening. So if The Last Jedi got $220 million, that means this film will get around about $200 million in its opening weekend. If we look at Rotten Tomatoes, we can see we've got a bit of a mixed bag with the reviews. We've got 58% from the real critics and an 86% audience score from the authenticated ticket people, which I think are people that have bought tickets through Fandango. If you haven't bought a ticket through Fandango, you can still register a score, but it isn't shown in this audience score. You have to drill into it a little bit, and you can see, I think right now it's about 77% for that, so it is a bit lower, but the official audience score is 86%, and the critics are 58%. Now, I have seen the movie, but if I hadn't seen the movie and I was somewhat interested and I looked at this is exactly the kind of score that would make me go see it, in that the critics are a bit meh on it, but the audience likes it. If I see a high critic score, I'm generally very suspicious, but a lowish score like this makes me think that the film could probably be actually good. But again, I'm fairly cynical on their scores, and because the audience is saying it's quite good, 86%, this to me would get me to go see the movie. So I think this is a perfect score for a film, rather than 99%, for the critics. I think 58 and then 86, that looks pretty good to me. Now, it wasn't too long ago, it was on 88%, so it has dropped 2% fairly quickly. It only has 6,570 raters so far, so as that number increases, I do expect the audience score will drop. But I think the more interesting one to watch might be the unauthenticated audience scores, which is where you go if you don't have a ticket from Fandango, or where you go if you didn't have a ticket at all. So I fully expect that, because there's a lot of hatred out there for the Disney Star Wars, and perhaps justifiably so, there's a lot of people that want to see it fail in perhaps the hopes that the next Disney film will be quote-unquote more to their liking. And so it'll be interesting to see if the other score is actually review bombed, and if it drops down to a really, really low figure, like a single-digit figure. But at this stage, I think that was on 77%, and this one here with the authenticated scores is on 86%. So we'll have to wait and see if this $44 million plus from the quote-unquote sources that Deadline have is correct. But once again, if that is true, that's pretty huge news for this film. It is certainly not going to be a box office catastrophe in the US domestic market if it gets anything like $44 million on Thursday. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next time.